No one in that bakery realized they were witnessing the beginning of a war. 48 hours later, the police would seal off the entire block. 6 men would be dead. One of the most feared mafia bosses in the city would vanish without a trace. And a 7-year-old girl who only wanted a slice of birthday cake would become the most valuable target in the criminal underworld. But in that moment, everything still looked ordinary. The ovens hummed, sugar hung warm in the air, customers laughed softly. Then a homeless woman leaned over the counter and whispered a question she clearly didn't want anyone to hear. "Do you have any expired cake?" What she didn't know was that a man sitting in the corner booth heard every word. A man who had ordered executions without blinking. A man who hadn't shown mercy in 30 years. And the reason he stood up had nothing to do with kindness. It had everything to do with a little girl's hair ribbon and a past he thought was buried forever. Elena had no idea who the man sitting in the corner of the bakery was. If she had known, she would have turned around the instant she felt Sophia's small fingers tighten around hers. She would have swallowed her pride, ignored the hunger clawing at her chest, and walked straight back into the cold streets without looking back. Everyone in the city knew the name Salvatore Costa. They said he had never bowed to anyone. They said grown men lowered their eyes when he entered a room. They said he ruled half the city through fear alone, that his word carried more weight than the law, and most of all, they said he had never knelt for anyone. Yet on that ordinary afternoon, in a modest neighborhood bakery that smelled of sugar and warm bread, Salvatore Costa would do something no one had ever seen before. The twist did not begin with kindness. It began with recognition. When Salvatore stood up from his chair, the scrape of wood against tile cut through the low hum of conversation. Several customers glanced over instinctively, sensing danger before they understood it. But Salvatore's attention was fixed on something small, almost invisible to everyone else. A hair clip, old, plastic, slightly cracked at the hinge, faded pink, shaped like a tiny flower. For a fraction of a second, the world around him blurred. That hair clip was identical to the one his niece had worn the last time he saw her, years ago, before she vanished from his life along with her mother. He had buried that memory under decades of violence and power, convinced himself that nothing could reach it again. And yet here it was, pinned clumsily into the hair of a 7-year-old girl standing in front of a cake display. Elena leaned closer to the counter, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you have any expired cake? Just a small piece. It's my daughter's birthday." A soft snicker came from somewhere behind her. Another customer turned away, pretending not to hear. Shame burned Elena's cheeks, but she forced herself to stay still. She had learned long ago that dignity was a luxury for people who could afford full meals. Sophia squeezed her hand, her eyes darting between the colorful cakes and her mother's face. Hope and fear lived side by side in that small expression, each afraid the other might win. Salvatore heard everything. He walked toward them slowly, his presence filling the space before anyone dared to step aside. The air in the bakery changed, thick with tension. Even the cashier stiffened, her smile fading as she recognized him. When Salvatore stopped behind Elena, she felt it instantly. Not a touch, not a word, just the weight of someone dangerous standing far too close. Her body reacted before her mind could. She pulled Sophia half a step behind her, instinctively shielding her. Then Salvatore spoke. "Which cake do you want?" His voice was low, calm, carrying an authority that didn't need to be raised to be obeyed. The room fell silent. Sophia peeked out from behind her mother's coat. She stared up at him with wide eyes, unsure whether to speak. Slowly, hesitantly, she lifted one small finger and pointed to the most expensive cake in the display, a tall vanilla cake decorated with pink roses and bright sprinkles. Almost immediately, she shook her head. "A small piece is okay," she said quickly, as if afraid she had asked for too much. "I don't need the whole one." That sentence shattered something inside Salvatore. He had heard screams without flinching. He had watched men beg for mercy and felt nothing. But the sound of a child learning to shrink her wishes to survive struck deeper than any gunshot ever had. For a long moment, he said nothing. Elena's heart raced, bracing for anger, for humiliation, for consequences she could not predict. Instead, Salvatore turned to the cashier. "I'll take the cake." Relief flooded Elena too quickly. "The whole bakery," Salvatore added. The words didn't register at first. The cashier blinked, unsure she had heard correctly. "Sir, I'm buying everything," he said evenly. "Lock the door. No more customers today." The bakery froze. Elena turned, disbelief written across her face. "Sir, please," she said softly. "We don't need." Salvatore raised a hand, not to silence her, but to pause the moment. His gaze returned to Sophia, lingering on the hair clip, on her thin arms, on the way she stood as if expecting the ground to disappear beneath her at any second. "This isn't about cake," he said quietly. Elena didn't understand what he meant, but something in his tone made her throat tighten. This man was not offering charity. He was responding to something much older, something far more dangerous. The cashier rang up the total with trembling hands. Salvatore paid without looking at the number. Money had never meant much to him. What mattered was the memory rising uninvited in his chest, a small girl, a proud sister, a birthday that ended in disappointment and silence. Sophia watched as candles were placed carefully on the cake. 7 of them. She counted twice to be sure. "Can I blow them out?" she asked, her voice barely containing excitement. Salvatore nodded. "Make a wish." She closed her eyes tightly, lips pressed together in concentration, then blew. The flames flickered out, leaving thin trails of smoke curling into the air. Elena felt tears sting her eyes, overwhelmed by the absurd beauty of the moment. For the first time in months, her daughter was smiling without reservation. Salvatore straightened, his expression unreadable, around them. The bakery remained silent, everyone aware they were witnessing something that didn't belong in this world. What none of them knew, not Elena, not Sophia, not even Salvatore himself, was that this single act had already set events into motion. Eyes were watching, phones were ringing, and in another part of the city, a man who thrived on cruelty would soon learn that Salvatore Costa had found something worth protecting. As they boxed the cake and gathered the remaining pastries, Salvatore glanced once more at the door, his instincts sharpening. He had crossed a line he could never uncross. In trying to reclaim a piece of his past, he had just exposed his future, and that would cost him far more than money. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel to enjoy many more heart-stirring stories every week. The bakery closed early that day, its door locked while daylight still spilled across the street. Elena noticed it as they stepped outside, the bell unusually silent behind them. She held the box of cake with both hands as if it were fragile glass, afraid that if she loosened her grip, the moment would shatter and reality would rush back in. Sophia walked between her and Salvatore, her fingers sticky with frosting, her face glowing with a happiness Elena hadn't seen in months. People stared. They always did. But this time, it was different. Whispers followed them down the sidewalk, not because Elena looked homeless, but because the man beside her radiated danger in an almost elegant way. Salvatore Costa did not walk like someone who belonged among ordinary people. He walked like a decision had already been made, and the world simply had to adjust. Elena felt it then, the creeping unease sliding beneath her gratitude. Kindness like this was never random, not from men like him. Salvatore stopped beside a black sedan parked at the curb. The driver stepped out immediately, opening the rear door without a word. Elena froze. Her instincts screamed that this was the moment everything went wrong. She pulled Sophia closer, her voice tight but steady. "We really appreciate the cake. That's more than enough. We should go." Salvatore studied her for a long second, not like a predator, not like a savior, like a man weighing consequences. "I'm not taking you anywhere you don't want to go," he said. "But you shouldn't walk back." Back. The word landed heavier than expected. Back to the alley behind the church. Back to cardboard and borrowed blankets. Back to nights spent pretending Sophia was asleep so she wouldn't hear the hunger in her mother's stomach. Sophia looked up at Elena, eyes bright with trust. "Mom, can we sit in the car just a little?" "It smells nice." Elena hesitated, then nodded. 1 minute, she told herself. Just one. Inside. The car was warm and quiet, leather seats soft beneath tired bodies. Sophia leaned back with a small sigh, clutching the cake box to her chest. Elena sat stiffly, every muscle prepared to move if needed. Salvatore took the seat across from them, leaving space. as if he understood boundaries better than most men who offered help. "When was the last time you had a proper meal?" he asked. Elena answered without thinking. "Yesterday morning?" The truth came out too easily. She looked away immediately, ashamed. Salvatore did not react the way she expected. No pity, no judgment, just a slight tightening of his jaw. He picked up his phone and made a call, his voice low, controlled. "Bring food," he said. "Enough for a family." Elena swallowed hard. "Why are you doing this?" Salvatore's gaze drifted to Sophia, who was carefully peeling a candle from the cake as if it were treasure. "Because I recognize what it costs to ask for less than you deserve." The car pulled away smoothly, merging into traffic. Elena realized too late that she had never said where they were going. As buildings blurred past the window, tension settled into her chest. "You didn't answer my question," she said quietly. "What do you want from us?" Salvatore met her eyes. "Nothing you don't choose to give." It sounded honest. That frightened her more than any threat could have. They stopped in front of an apartment building that looked nothing like Elena expected. Brick walls, clean windows, flower boxes along the balconies. Children's bicycles leaned against the fence. Normal life existed here, undisturbed by fear. Salvatore stepped out first, holding the door open for Sophia. The girl hopped down, awe written across her face. "This is where people live?" she asked. "Yes," Salvatore said. "Some of them." Inside, the air smelled faintly of soap and sunlight. The apartment he led them to was modest but bright, already furnished, already stocked. Elena stood in the doorway, unable to cross the threshold. It felt like trespassing into someone else's future. "This is temporary," Salvatore said, anticipating her thoughts. "No contracts, no obligations, just a place to sleep where the door locks." Elena's defenses wavered. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine Sophia waking up in a real bed, going to school clean, laughing without fear of being overheard by strangers. The image hurt more than hope ever had. Sophia ran to the bedroom and gasped. "Mom, there are books." Elena pressed a hand to her mouth, emotion rising fast and dangerous. She turned to Salvatore, searching his face for the hidden cost. "People like you don't do things like this without a reason." "You're right," he said. "People like me usually don't." That was when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and something cold passed through his eyes. Just for a second. But Elena saw it. She had lived long enough to recognize the moment warmth turned into calculation. Across the city. Vincent Torino smiled at the same notification. He had received photos. A man kneeling in a bakery, a child with a cake, a woman whose face did not belong in Salvatore Costa's world. For years, Vincent had searched for leverage and found none. Now it had walked into a bakery and asked for expired cake. Back in the apartment, Salvatore slipped the phone into his pocket. "You're safe here," he said, a promise and a warning intertwined. Elena nodded slowly. She did not know why, but she believed him. What she didn't know was that safety had already become relative. The moment Salvatore chose to care. The rules changed. Kindness had marked them all. And somewhere in the city, someone was already planning how to turn it into a weapon. Night settled gently over the city, but inside the apartment, Elena could not relax. Sophia fell asleep quickly in the unfamiliar bed. Exhaustion finally winning over excitement, her small body curled around a stuffed bear she had found on the shelf. Elena stood in the doorway for a long time, watching her chest rise and fall, memorizing the sight as if it could be taken away at any moment. She closed the door softly and turned to find Salvatore in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, quietly unpacking groceries that had arrived while Sophia was bathing. The sight unsettled her more than the guns she had imagined him carrying. This was a man who moved with purpose even in silence, who treated space as if it belonged to him simply by existing within it. "You don't have to stay," Elena said, her voice low. "We'll be fine." Salvatore glanced at her, a faint curve at the corner of his mouth. "Neither of us believes that." He poured 2 glasses of water and slid one toward her across the counter, careful not to touch her hand. The restraint was deliberate, and Elena noticed. Men who wanted something usually took space. Salvatore did not. "You're afraid," he said, I'd be stupid not to be, she replied. Something like approval crossed his face. Good. Fear keeps you alive. They stood there for a moment, the apartment humming softly around them. Elena realized how strange it felt to share silence with a man whose name carried violence like a shadow. Yet beneath it, there was an ease she couldn't explain, as if both of them recognized something familiar in the other. I didn't plan to involve you, Salvatore said quietly. That bakery wasn't supposed to be… this? Elena's grip tightened around the glass. Then why did you… He hesitated, just long enough to tell her the truth wasn't simple. Because I saw something I lost, he said, and because I don't want to lose it again. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He checked it, expression hardening in a way that made Elena's stomach drop. He turned slightly away, lowering his voice, but she caught fragments. Names, locations, a question that sounded too calm to be harmless. When he ended the call, the room felt smaller. Who was that, Elena asked. A reminder. He said that my world doesn't pause just because I want it to. The words settled between them, heavy with implication. Elena crossed her arms, grounding herself. I need to know what danger you've brought to my daughter. Salvatore met her gaze steadily. And I need to know what danger you're willing to face to keep her safe. The tension shifted then, no longer unspoken. This was no longer charity. It was negotiation. Across town, Vincent Torino watched the same apartment building through binoculars. His mouth curled in something resembling amusement. He had known Salvatore for decades, long enough to recognize the signs of a weakness forming. Care changed men, made them predictable. Vincent had already sent someone to confirm what he suspected. Back in the apartment, a knock echoed through the hallway. Elena flinched. Salvatore moved instantly, positioning himself between her and the door. He checked the peephole, then relaxed slightly. Food, he said. When the door opened, a man in a tailored suit handed over a paper bag without stepping inside. His eyes flicked to Elena, assessing, memorizing. She didn't miss it. Eat, Salvatore said after the door closed. Tomorrow, we talk about what comes next. Elena shook her head. Tomorrow might be too late. He studied her, something like respect deepening in his eyes. You're stronger than you think. I don't have a choice, she replied. Neither does Sophia. Later, after Elena ate mechanically and checked on Sophia again, she found Salvatore standing by the window, city lights reflecting in his eyes. She joined him, careful to keep distance, yet aware of the warmth between them. You could still walk away, she said. Forget you ever saw us. He turned to her fully then, the mask slipping just enough. If I walk away now, I'll lose more than I've lost in years. The honesty caught her off guard. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the space between them, charged with something neither was ready to name. Romance hovered there, fragile and dangerous, born not of desire, but of shared vulnerability. A sharp vibration broke the moment. Salvatore checked his phone and went still. What is it? Elena asked. Vincent knows, he said. Her breath hitched. Knows what? That you exist, as if summoned by the words. A message appeared on his screen. A photo. Elena and Sophia entering the bakery earlier that day. Another, Sophia asleep in the car. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. He's been watching us. Yes, Salvatore said, voice cold now. And he's asking a question. What question? How much you're worth to me. Silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. Elena thought of Sophia's laughter, of books on shelves, of a bed that felt like safety for the first time in months. Then she thought of men like Vincent, of what they did to leverage. I won't let him use her, she said, fierce and sudden. Salvatore nodded once. Neither will I. In that moment, something irrevocable formed between them. Not a promise of peace, but a pact born of necessity and choice. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that lines had been drawn. By choosing to protect them, Salvatore had invited war into their lives. And by staying, Elena had chosen to stand in its path. Morning arrived without softness. Elena woke before dawn, the habit of survival refusing to loosen its grip even inside warm walls. For a few disoriented seconds, she lay still, listening. No sirens, no footsteps outside the door. Only the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint rhythm of Sophia's breathing from the next room. Relief followed, thin and cautious. In the kitchen, Salvatore was already awake. He stood at the counter, jacket on, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in a language Elena didn't understand but somehow recognized short sentences, clipped commands, the sound of control being reasserted. When he noticed her, he ended the call immediately. The shift was subtle, but real. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "A little," she said. He smiled faintly. "Enough." Sophia emerged moments later, hair rumpled, eyes bright. "Mom, there's cereal," she announced, as if she had discovered treasure. Salvatore watched her with an expression Elena couldn't quite place. Not affection exactly, something closer to reverence. As Sophia ate, a knock came at the door. This time, Elena didn't flinch. She felt it instead, a tightening deep in her chest. Salvatore answered it, revealing two men in dark suits. They spoke quietly, professionally. Security arrangements, rotations, eyes on surrounding streets. Elena understood the meaning even without the words. When the door closed, she faced him. "This is because of Vincent." "Yes." "How long do we have before he tries something?" Salvatore didn't answer right away. "That depends on how patient he decides to be." The uncertainty unsettled her more than any deadline could have. Elena took a breath, steadying herself. "I need to tell you something." He turned fully toward her, giving her his attention without interruption. She appreciated that more than she wanted to admit. "I've seen him before," she said. "Vincent?" The name fell between them like a dropped glass. Salvatore's eyes sharpened. "When?" "Years ago," Elena continued. "Before Sophia was born, I worked nights at a restaurant he owned. I didn't know who he really was at first. Just that people were afraid of him." Salvatore said nothing, letting her speak. "He noticed me," she said quietly, not in a kind way. "I quit after 2 weeks, packed up and left town the same night." "And he let you go?" Salvatore asked. Elena shook her head. "He didn't know where I went. I made sure of that." Understanding flickered across Salvatore's face, followed by something darker. "Then this isn't just leverage," he said. "It's unfinished business." Sophia looked up from her bowl. "Who's Vincent?" Elena forced a smile. "Just someone we don't talk about." Salvatore knelt beside Sophia, his voice gentle. "Today, you're going to stay inside. There are books, puzzles, anything you want." "Okay," Sophia nodded, trusting. That trust twisted something in Elena's chest. After Sophia returned to her room, silence filled the apartment. Elena crossed her arms. "You should have told me sooner how dangerous this was. You should have told me you'd crossed his path before." Salvatore replied evenly. The tension between them sharpened. Not anger, but fear wearing sharper edges. For a moment, it seemed they might pull apart under the weight of it. Instead, Elena stepped closer. "I'm not running," she said. "I won't make Sophia disappear again." Salvatore searched her face, seeing not defiance but resolve. "Then neither will I." They stood there, closer than they should have been, the air charged with unspoken emotion. Romance hovered between them, dangerous and undeniable, shaped by shared risk rather than tenderness. Salvatore reached out, stopping just short of touching her hand. He withdrew it slowly, choosing restraint. Outside, a car idled longer than necessary across the street. Vincent Torino sat inside, watching the building through sunglasses, his smile thin. "He's protecting them," he said to the man beside him. "Good. That makes this simple." Back inside, Salvatore's phone vibrated. A message. One sentence. "You've changed." "Salvatore." He typed a reply without hesitation. "No. I've chosen." Moments later, another message appeared. A photo this time. Sophia at the window. Earlier that morning. Elena saw Salvatore's reaction before he showed her the screen. Her heart dropped. "He's close." "Yes," Salvatore said quietly. "Closer than I'd like." "What do we do?" He looked at her then, truly looked at her, as if measuring not her fear but her strength. "We prepare," he said, "and we don't wait for him to decide the rules." That afternoon, the apartment transformed subtly. Locks reinforced, curtains adjusted, men stationed at discreet distances. Elena watched it all, absorbing the reality she had stepped into. This was no longer borrowed safety. It was a fortress being tested. As evening approached, Sophia asked to light a candle from the leftover cake. Elena hesitated, then allowed it. The small flame flickered between innocence and threat. Salvatore watched from the doorway, his expression softening despite himself. In that quiet moment, Elena felt the weight of being seen not as a victim, not as leverage, but as someone worth fighting for. It scared her more than invisibility ever had. Outside, Vincent's car disappeared into traffic. The first move had been made. The night did not bring rest. It brought waiting. Elena sat on the edge of the couch long after Sophia had fallen asleep, her hands wrapped around a mug that had long gone cold. Outside, the city breathed in low, distant sounds, cars passing, a siren far away, laughter drifting from somewhere that felt impossibly normal. Inside the apartment, every sound felt amplified, as if the walls themselves were listening. Salvatore stood near the window, his silhouette sharp against the glass. He had been there for nearly an hour, watching patterns most people would never notice. A car slowing too much, a shadow lingering where it shouldn't. His world had taught him that danger rarely announced itself loudly. "You don't have to stay up," Elena said quietly. "I do," he replied. "Tonight, more than most." She studied him from across the room. In the dim light, he looked older than she expected. Not weak, never that, but worn, like a man who had been carrying weight for too long without setting it down. The thought surprised her. She had imagined men like Salvatore Costa as untouched by exhaustion, fueled entirely by power. "You're angry," she said. He turned slightly. "I'm careful. That's not the same thing." A pause stretched between them. Then he exhaled slowly. "Vincent doesn't usually watch," he said. "He acts. The fact that he's waiting means he wants me to make a mistake. And you won't." Salvatore's gaze met hers, steady and unflinching. Everyone does eventually. The honesty unsettled her more than bravado ever could. Elena stood and walked toward him, stopping a careful distance away. "Then why bring us into this?" The question hung heavy, stripped of accusation. Salvatore looked back out the window before answering. "Because leaving you out of it would have been worse," he said. "Men like Vincent don't forget. They circle." And now, she asked, "Now he's measuring how much I'm willing to lose." Elena's chest tightened. She thought of Sophia sleeping peacefully in the next room, unaware that her safety was being weighed by strangers. "I won't be the thing he uses," she said firmly. "And neither will my daughter." Salvatore nodded. "That's why I'm changing the rules." Before she could ask what that meant, his phone buzzed again. This time, he didn't look away as he read the message. He handed the phone to Elena. "Tomorrow, noon. Come alone." Elena's fingers trembled slightly as she read it. "He wants to meet you." "Yes, that's insane." "No," Salvatore said calmly. "It's expected." She looked up at him sharply. "You're not going." "I am." Fear surged through her, hot and immediate. "You can't just walk into his trap." He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "If I don't, he'll come here. And next time, he won't knock." The logic was brutal, effective. Elena hated that she understood it. "And what happens if you don't come back?" she asked, for a fraction of a second. Salvatore didn't answer. Then, quietly, "Then you leave. Immediately. Everything will be arranged." The idea hit her like a blow. Leave. Again. Run with Sophia, carrying someone else's consequences. She shook her head. "I'm not doing that. This isn't a choice," he said. "It is for me," she replied, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her ribs. "I didn't ask for your protection. I accepted it. That means I get a say in what happens next." Salvatore studied her, something fierce and reluctant flickering in his eyes. No one spoke to him like that anymore. No one dared. Except her. You're asking to stand in the middle of something that will destroy you, he said. Elena met his gaze without flinching. I've been destroyed before. I survived. The silence that followed was charged, thick with recognition. In that moment, something shifted between them. Not tenderness, not comfort. A deeper alignment, forged by shared resolve. Romance, dangerous and unspoken, threaded through the tension. From the hallway came a small sound. Sophia stood there, clutching her stuffed bear, eyes half asleep. Mom Elena moved instantly, kneeling to pull her close. Did we wake you? Sophia shook her head, pressing her cheek into Elena's shoulder. I had a bad dream. Salvatore crouched beside them, lowering himself to Sophia's level. Do you want to tell me about it? She hesitated, then nodded. There was a man who wanted to take my cake away. Something cold passed through Salvatore's chest. Did he? Sophia shook her head. No, you were there. Elena felt tears threaten, sudden and unwanted. Salvatore placed a hand gently on Sophia's back, grounding, protective. I'm always nearby, he said softly, later, after Sophia was asleep again. Elena lingered by her door, watching her chest rise and fall. When she turned, Salvatore was there, closer than before. The air between them felt different now, stripped bare. She trusts you, Elena said. I know, he replied. That's what scares me. She reached out without thinking, her fingers brushing his wrist. The contact was brief, electric. Salvatore stilled, then covered her hand with his own. The touch was restrained, deliberate, as if both of them understood how easily it could become something neither could afford. For one suspended moment, the world narrowed to breath and warmth and everything unspoken. Then Salvatore stepped back, breaking the spell. Tomorrow changes everything, he said. Yes, Elena replied. It does. As dawn crept closer, neither of them slept again. Somewhere across the city, Vincent Torino prepared for noon, already convinced he was in control. What he did not yet understand was that Salvatore Costa had never walked into a meeting unarmed, and Elena, once invisible, was no longer willing to be moved like a piece on someone else's board. Noon arrived with cruel precision. Salvatore left the apartment without ceremony, dressed in dark restraint, every movement deliberate. Elena watched from the doorway, Sophia's small hand wrapped tightly around her leg. She had not told her daughter where Salvatore was going. Some truths were too sharp to carry into a child's world. I'll be back before dinner, Salvatore said, his voice calm enough to be convincing. Sophia nodded, trusting without question. Elena did not. She held his gaze, searching for something she could anchor herself to. He gave her a brief nod, not reassurance, not goodbye, but acknowledgement. Then he was gone. The restaurant Vincent Torino had chosen sat on a quiet street, elegant in a way that suggested money without taste. Salvatore entered alone. That, at least, was honest. Vincent waited at a corner table, wine already poured, his smile polished and hollow. Salvatore, Vincent said, standing just enough to show respect without offering any. You look different. Salvatore took the seat across from him. You didn't invite me here to comment on my appearance. Vincent chuckled softly. Straight to business? I've missed that about you. They spoke politely at first, like men who had not spent years dismantling each other's lives from opposite sides of the city. Vincent gestured lazily with his glass. You've grown careless, he said, letting strangers into your orbit. They're not strangers, Salvatore replied. Vincent's eyes gleamed. That's exactly the problem. The wine remained untouched. Vincent leaned forward. I want you to step back. Quietly. Transfer 2 of your roots. No drama. In return, the woman and the child walk away untouched. Salvatore didn't blink. No. Vincent sighed, almost regretful. Then you force my hand. Salvatore stood. You already have. As he turned to leave, Vincent's voice followed him. By the way, she's stronger than she looks. Elena, right, survival does that. Salvatore's jaw tightened, but he did not turn back. Back at the apartment, Elena paced, counting minutes she could not control. Every sound outside made her heart stutter. Sophia sat on the floor drawing, blissfully unaware of the storm unfolding beyond the walls. The phone rang. Elena answered without thinking. "Lovely place," Vincent said smoothly. "I imagine it feels like safety." Her blood went cold. "If you're calling to threaten us?" "No," he interrupted gently. "I'm calling to thank you. You've made Salvatore predictable." Before she could respond, the line went dead. Elena stared at the phone, then moved. She locked doors, checked windows, pulled Sophia close. Fear sharpened into something else clarity. She was done waiting to be protected. An hour later, Salvatore returned. He looked unchanged, but Elena sensed the shift immediately. Something had broken open. "He won't stop," Elena said. "No," Salvatore agreed. "He won't." They stood together in the living room, close but not touching. The apartment felt smaller now, walls pressing in with unspoken knowledge. Salvatore met her gaze. "I tried to end it cleanly." And she asked. "And he wants blood," Salvatore said quietly. "Or leverage." Elena inhaled slowly. "Then he won't get either." She said it without bravado, surprising them both. Salvatore studied her, recognizing the resolve he'd once seen in his sister's eyes. "You don't understand what that costs." "I understand enough," she replied. "Running won't save us. Hiding won't save us. The only way this ends is if he loses." Salvatore didn't argue. He nodded once. "Then you need to know everything." He told her about the old alliances, the betrayals, the lines Vincent had crossed long ago. He told her how power shifted, how weakness was exploited, how mercy was mistaken for surrender. Elena listened, absorbing the ugliness without flinching. This was the world she had stepped into. Pretending otherwise would only get Sophia killed. Night fell again, heavier than the last. Sophia slept restlessly, murmuring in dreams. Elena sat beside her bed until the fear eased, then returned to the living room. Salvatore was there, checking a weapon with practiced ease. She watched him, noting how careful he was, how controlled. Violence did not excite him. It burdened him. "You won't let them take her," Elena said. "Never," he replied. The word carried finality. She stepped closer. "And if it comes down to choosing," Salvatore met her eyes, "then I choose her. Every time." Something in Elena softened, even as danger closed in. She reached for him, resting her forehead briefly against his chest. The intimacy was quiet, fragile, born of trust rather than desire. Salvatore's hand came up slowly, resting at her back, grounding her, outside. A car door closed softly. Neither of them heard it. By the time the first signal from Salvatore's security went silent, Vincent Torino was already setting his next move into motion. He had underestimated Elena's resolve and misunderstood Salvatore's restraint. The game had shifted, and this time, it would not end at the negotiating table. The first sign that something was wrong came quietly. Elena noticed it while rinsing a cup in the sink. Her movements slow, deliberate. The hum she had grown used to, the low, reassuring presence of people stationed outside, was gone. No footsteps in the hallway, no murmured voices through the walls, just an emptiness that felt too deliberate to be coincidence. She turned toward Salvatore. He was already still. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Years of survival had taught them both that silence often carried the loudest warnings. Salvatore moved first, crossing the living room with controlled speed, checking the reinforced lock, the windows, the secondary exit he had insisted on adding. Everything looked untouched. That made it worse. "They're gone," Elena said quietly. "Yes," Salvatore replied. "And they didn't leave by choice?" A sharp knock echoed through the apartment. Not violent, not rushed, almost polite. Sophia stirred in her sleep from the bedroom, murmuring something unintelligible. Elena's heart slammed against her ribs. Salvatore raised one finger to his lips, then moved toward the door, positioning himself just out of sight. Another knock, firmer this time. "Mr. Costa," a voice called softly from the other side. "We just want to talk." "Vincent." The name didn't need to be spoken. It lived in the air like poison. Elena backed toward Sophia's room, every instinct screaming. Salvatore caught her wrist gently. stopping her just long enough to meet her eyes. "Get her," he mouthed. Elena didn't hesitate. She slipped into the bedroom, kneeling beside the bed. Sophia's eyes opened immediately, alert in a way no child should have learned to be. "Mom, we're playing a quiet game," Elena whispered, forcing calm into her voice, under the bed, just like before. Sophia nodded, clutching her stuffed bear as she crawled into the shadows. Elena slid the door nearly shut, leaving it just enough to see. In the living room, the knock became a test. Salvatore stepped closer to the door, his voice low and even. "You're trespassing." Vincent laughed softly. "You're the one hiding behind locks." The sound of a key turning followed. Salvatore's jaw tightened. "They have the building." "Yes," Vincent said pleasantly. "I told you proximity works both ways." The door opened. 3 men entered first, moving with trained efficiency. Vincent followed, impeccably dressed, his smile mild and infuriating. His gaze swept the room, landing briefly on the closed bedroom door. "You've redecorated," Vincent remarked. "Almost makes me nostalgic." Salvatore stood his ground. "This ends tonight." Vincent tilted his head. "That depends on you." He gestured, and one of his men placed a phone on the table. A live feed flickered to life. Elena gasped despite herself. 2 of Salvatore's men, bound and bloodied, knelt in a dim room. "Alive. For now." "Still think you're choosing?" Vincent asked lightly. Salvatore's expression did not change. "Let them go." Vincent shrugged. "You know I can't do that." Elena stepped forward then, her voice steady despite the terror burning through her veins. "You don't want him," she said. "You want control?" Vincent's gaze shifted to her, curious. "You're sharper than I expected." "I won't beg," Elena continued. "But I won't let you take my daughter." Something flickered behind Vincent's eyes. Annoyance, perhaps admiration. "I don't want the child," he said. "I want what she represents." Salvatore moved instantly, placing himself between Vincent and the bedroom. "You won't touch her." Vincent sighed. Always so dramatic. The sound of sirens rose faintly in the distance. Salvatore had triggered something backup, consequences, chaos. Vincent knew it too. His smile thinned. This was inevitable. Vincent said, "You don't get to walk away from who you are." A sudden crash echoed from the hallway. Gunfire followed, sharp and deafening. Chaos erupted. One of Vincent's men went down. Another fired blindly. Salvatore lunged, tackling Vincent to the floor as glass shattered around them. Elena moved without thinking. She slammed the bedroom door shut, barricading it with her body, her heart screaming her daughter's name. Sophia didn't make a sound. Salvatore fought with brutal efficiency. Disarming one man, firing once, twice. Vincent scrambled back, fury replacing amusement. "You chose wrong," he snarled. "No," Salvatore said coldly. "I chose her." Sirens grew louder. The building filled with noise. Footsteps, shouting. Vincent retreated toward the door, blood staining his sleeve. He paused, locking eyes with Elena. "This isn't over," he promised. Salvatore raised the gun. Vincent vanished down the hallway before the shot could land. Silence followed, broken only by distant alarms. Elena slid down against the bedroom door, trembling. "Sophia," she whispered. A small hand reached out from under the bed. "I was quiet," Sophia said. Elena pulled her into her arms, sobbing soundlessly. Salvatore stood in the doorway, chest heaving, eyes scanning until he was sure they were safe. For now, outside, blue and red lights flooded the street. Inside, 3 lives clung together in the aftermath of violence that had crossed the final line. The doors had failed, and the war had truly begun. The safe house was quiet in a way that felt unnatural, like the pause between 2 heartbeats. It sat far from the city center, hidden behind a shell of anonymity, no signs, no neighbors close enough to ask questions. Salvatore had used it only once before, years ago, after a betrayal that had rewritten his understanding of loyalty. Bringing Elena and Sophia here meant one thing: the war had crossed a point of no return. Elena noticed the difference immediately. This place wasn't designed for comfort. It was designed to endure. Sophia clutched her bear as she explored the small living room, eyes wide, absorbing the tension without fully understanding it. Elena stayed close, her hand never straying far from her daughter's shoulder. Since the apartment, fear had changed shape. It was no longer sharp and panicked. It was cold, watchful, always awake. Salvatore checked the perimeter himself. When he finally stepped inside, he locked the door and leaned against it for a brief moment, eyes closed. The mask slipped just enough for Elena to see the weight he carried. "They won't come tonight," he said. "Vincent needs time to regroup. That won't stop him." Elena replied, "No." Salvatore agreed, "But it gives us a window." They stood facing each other, the silence between them heavy with everything they hadn't said. The closeness felt different now, not charged with danger alone, but with something fragile and human. Survival had a way of stripping people down to truth. "You didn't have to stay," Elena said softly. "You could have sent us away." Salvatore met her gaze. "And let him hunt you without me?" "No." The certainty in his voice unsettled her more than fear ever had. She turned away, busying herself with unpacking the few things they'd brought, her hands shaking despite her efforts. Sophia fell asleep early, exhaustion finally claiming her. Elena sat beside her on the narrow bed, watching the rise and fall of her chest. Every sound outside made her flinch. When she finally stepped back into the living room, Salvatore was seated at the table, maps and documents spread before him. "You're planning something," Elena said. "I'm planning an end," he replied. She sat across from him. "Ends have consequences." "Yes," he said quietly. "That's why I've avoided this one." He explained Vincent's network, the alliances that fed his power, the corruption woven so deeply into the city that removing him would cause tremors no one could fully control. Elena listened, absorbing each detail. This wasn't bravado or strategy alone. It was confession. "There's something you haven't told me," she said. Salvatore didn't deny it. He reached into his jacket and placed a folded photograph on the table. Elena picked it up slowly. It showed two girls, maybe 6 or 7 years old, standing in front of a faded house. One of them wore a familiar hair clip. Elena's breath caught. "Sophia." "No," Salvatore said. "My niece, Lucia." The resemblance was uncanny. Same dark eyes. Same quiet seriousness even in childhood. "She disappeared 12 years ago." He continued. "Taken to punish me. Vincent didn't give the order, but he benefited from it, and he helped make sure she was never found." Elena looked up, heart pounding. "You think I don't know?" Salvatore said. "But when I saw Sophia, I realized I never stopped looking." The truth settled between them, raw and dangerous. Elena felt anger, sorrow, and something else she hadn't expected understanding. "You're not saving us out of guilt," she said. "No," Salvatore replied. "I'm staying because losing you would break something I can't afford to lose again." The admission hung in the air, unpolished and real. Later that night, Elena couldn't sleep. She stepped outside onto the small porch, the cool air biting at her skin. The city lights were distant here, blurred and faint. Salvatore joined her moments later, handing her a coat without comment. "I'm not asking you to choose this life," he said. "If you want to disappear, I'll make it happen." Elena shook her head. "Running didn't save me before. It won't save us now." He studied her, something like admiration softening his expression. "Then you need to be ready." "For what?" "For the truth," Salvatore said. "About who you are in this war." Before she could ask what he meant, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, tension snapping back into place. "They found something," he said. "What kind of something?" Elena asked. The kind Vincent didn't want uncovered. He turned the screen toward her. It was a file, old but meticulously kept. Names, dates, transactions, and one photograph at the bottom. Sophia, younger, sitting in a clinic waiting room. Elena's knees weakened. "That's impossible." Salvatore's voice was grim. Vincent didn't just find leverage. He's been watching her since she was born. The realization crashed over Elena, stealing her breath. This wasn't a random crossing of paths. It was a convergence long in the making. Inside the house, Sophia stirred in her sleep, murmuring softly. Outside, Elena gripped the railing, the world tilting beneath her feet. The past hadn't followed them into the war. It had orchestrated it. The truth did not explode. It seeped. Elena spent the rest of the night sitting beside Sophia, watching her sleep as if the child might vanish if she blinked too long. The image Salvatore had shown her replayed endlessly in her mind, Sophia in a clinic waiting room. Years ago, unaware that someone powerful had already marked her existence. Fear gave way to fury, but beneath it all was a sharper realization: this war had never been accidental. At dawn, Salvatore gathered his remaining people. Not many were left. The room felt smaller with each empty chair, every absence carrying a name he refused to say aloud. He did not give a speech. He didn't need to. His men knew what this meeting meant. "We end it tonight," he said. No bravado, no promises of glory, only an ending. Elena listened from the doorway, Sophia tucked against her side. She should have felt terror. Instead, she felt a strange calm. The truth had burned away illusion. There was nothing left to misunderstand. When Salvatore dismissed the others, Elena stepped forward. "You're walking into a trap." "Yes," he replied, "but it's one he built. That makes all the difference." She searched his face. And after Salvatore hesitated, after depends on what survives. The honesty hurt more than any lie would have. They prepared quietly. Salvatore moved with ritual precision, checking weapons, memorizing routes, revisiting contingency plans that had not seen daylight in years. Elena packed a single bag not to run, but to be ready. She dressed Sophia in layers, brushing her hair slowly, carefully, as if time itself had softened. "Mom," Sophia whispered, sensing the weight in the air. "Are we going away?" Elena knelt, meeting her eyes. "We're going somewhere safer." Sophia nodded, accepting the answer without fear. Children often did. It was the adults who broke under questions. Before night fell, Salvatore pulled Elena aside. They stood near the window, the sky bleeding orange into darkness. "If things go wrong," he said quietly, "you leave, no hesitation." "And you?" Elena asked. "I'll make sure you can—" She shook her head. "I won't disappear again." Salvatore exhaled slowly. "Elena, you taught me something," she interrupted. "Running keeps you alive. Standing keeps you whole." Something shifted in his expression. He reached for her hand, not urgently, but with care, as if acknowledging a truth that had been growing between them since the bakery. His thumb brushed her knuckles once, a touch heavy with everything unsaid. "Then stay close," he murmured. Vincent chose the old shipping terminal for their final meeting. Of course he did. Open space, multiple exits, a place designed for disappearances. Salvatore arrived alone, exactly as promised. Vincent was waiting, flanked by shadows rather than men. He smiled when he saw Salvatore approach. "You came. I always do," Salvatore replied. They stood facing each other beneath flickering lights. Two men shaped by the same world, but hardened in different ways. Vincent's gaze was sharp, restless. Salvatore's was steady. "You should have taken my offer," Vincent said. "You could have walked away. There's no walking away from a child." Salvatore replied. "You know that." Vincent laughed softly. "You think this is about the girl? This is about legacy, about erasing weakness." Salvatore stepped closer. "Then you miscalculated." In the shadows, the plan unfolded. Authorities moved in silence. Evidence leaked. Accounts froze. Names were spoken that hadn't been spoken aloud in decades. Vincent realized too late that his web had been mapped. His allies turned. His exits closing. Gunfire erupted, brief and brutal. Chaos followed, but it was not the chaos Vincent controlled. When the smoke thinned, Vincent stood bleeding, cornered by consequences rather than men. He looked at Salvatore with something like disbelief. "You'd burn the city for them, no?" Salvatore said. "I'd rebuild it without you." Sirens tore through the night. Vincent was taken away, shouting promises that dissolved into noise. The terminal fell quiet, broken only by the sound of waves against steel. Salvatore walked away without looking back. By morning, the city woke to headlines that spoke of arrests, collapses, scandals long buried finally exposed. Vincent Torino's empire unraveled publicly, decisively. There would be trials, there would be fallout. But the war, as it had been, was over. At the safe house, Elena waited. She didn't cry when she saw Salvatore step through the door alive. She simply closed the distance between them, pressing her forehead against his chest, breathing him in. His arms came around her, steady and protective, not as armor, but as shelter. Sophia watched from the hallway, smiling sleepily. "You're back," she said. "Yes," Salvatore replied. "I am?" Later, as dawn filtered through the windows, they sat together in silence. The danger had not vanished completely. Shadows never did. But something fundamental had shifted. Elena rested her head on Salvatore's shoulder. "What happens now?" He looked at Sophia, then back at Elena. "Now," he said softly, "we choose something better." Outside, the city continued to breathe. And for the first time in a long while, the future did not feel like a threat, but a fragile promise waiting to be kept. The city did not heal overnight. It never did. In the weeks following Vincent Torino's fall, the streets learned a new rhythm, hesitant, uncertain, as if the absence of fear felt unfamiliar. Power vacuums invited chaos, but they also invited change. Salvatore watched it all from a distance, refusing offers, dismantling what remained of his old empire piece by piece. For the first time in decades, he was not ruling. He was choosing. Elena noticed the change in him before anyone else did. He slept more lightly now, no longer waking with his hand already reaching for a weapon. He listened more. He spoke less. And when he looked at Sophia, his gaze softened in a way that had nothing to do with protection and everything to do with hope. They moved out of the safe house at the beginning of spring. The new place was small, almost modest, tucked between quiet streets where no one cared who you were as long as you greeted them politely. There were no guards posted outside, no cameras watching every angle, just sunlight through the windows and the sound of children playing somewhere nearby. Sophia claimed the smallest room immediately. "This one feels happy," she declared, placing her bear on the bed as if sealing the decision. Elena laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in months. Happiness, she had learned, often arrived quietly. Salvatore stood in the doorway, watching them. He still wore shadows like old habits, but they no longer defined the room. When Elena turned to him, she caught the trace of uncertainty on his face. "You don't have to stay," she said gently. "Not because you're afraid you owe us." Salvatore stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I know," he replied. "I'm staying because I want to." The honesty settled between them like something earned. Life reassembled itself in careful fragments. Elena found work at a small cafe nearby, rediscovering the comfort of ordinary routines. Sophia started school, her laughter returning in full, unguarded bursts. Salvatore became a quiet constant, walking Sophia to class, fixing things that didn't need fixing, learning how to exist without command or fear. At night, he and Elena talked, not about the war, not about Vincent. They spoke about small things, favorite books, memories that didn't hurt, the kind of future that felt possible now. Sometimes silence filled the space instead, warm and unthreatening. Intimacy grew not from urgency, but from trust. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the windows, Elena found Salvatore standing on the balcony, staring out at the darkening sky. "You miss it," she said. He didn't deny it. "I miss knowing exactly who I was supposed to be." Elena joined him, resting her arms on the railing. "And now I don't know," he admitted, "but I don't feel lost." She reached for his hand. He didn't hesitate this time. Their fingers intertwined, not as a promise, but as a choice made in the present. Sophia appeared behind them, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Are you coming inside?" "In a minute," Elena said. Sophia nodded and paused, studying them with a seriousness far beyond her years. "I like it when you stand close," she said simply. Salvatore felt something loosen in his chest. "So do I." The past did not disappear. Questions about Sophia's origins lingered, unanswered but no longer threatening. Salvatore stopped searching for ghosts that refused to return. Some truths, he learned, did not need resolution to stop haunting you. They needed acceptance. Months passed. One morning, Salvatore watched Elena move through the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared breakfast. The sunlight caught her hair, turning it almost golden. In that moment, he understood something with startling clarity. This ordinary, fragile piece was what he had been fighting for without knowing it. "Elena," he said. She turned, curious. "I don't know how to be the man I was before," he continued. "But I know how to be here. If you'll let me." Elena set the mug down slowly. "I'm not asking you to save us anymore." "I know," he replied. "I'm asking to stay." She crossed the room and rested her forehead against his. Then stay. Their kiss was unhurried, tender, shaped by everything they had survived and everything they still chose to risk. It carried no urgency, no fear of loss, only presence. From the doorway, Sophia smiled. Later that day, they walked through the neighborhood together, hand in hand, blending into the quiet pulse of everyday life. No one looked twice. No one recognized the man who had once ruled the city's shadows, and Salvatore did not mind. For the first time, his name did not carry weight, only meaning. The war had ended not with domination, but with surrender to love, to choice, to a future that did not need blood to sustain it. And in that small, unremarkable place, 3 lives found something rare and enduring. Not safety, but home.